Why are the Maple Leafs so desperate to dump David Kampf that they're willing to consider sending him to basement-dwelling franchises? And what does that say about Toronto's ability to properly value their own players? You know what really gets under my skin? Watching a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs systematically dismantle the very depth pieces that championship teams are built on, all in the name of salary cap gymnastics that never seem to actually solve the underlying problems. And now, here we are again with David Kampf, a 30-year-old German center who does all the thankless, dirty work that winning teams need, being shopped around like yesterday's leftovers. The Columbus Blue Jackets, Chicago Blackhawks, and Pittsburgh Penguins are apparently circling, and I've got some thoughts about what this all means. Let's start with the cold, hard facts of the situation, because context matters here. David Kampf is signed to the 2026 to 2027 season at a cap hit of $2.4 million per year. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat about that being too much for a fourth-line center, let me ask you something. What's the value of a guy who wins over 51% of his faceoffs for his career, plays stellar defense, kills penalties like his life depends on it, and never complains about his role? Because that's exactly what Kampf brings to the table. But here's Toronto's problem, and it's a problem entirely of their own making. They brought in Nicholas Roy and Scott Laughton, two centers who are going to eat up minutes and roster spots. Suddenly, Kampf finds himself on the outside looking in, relegated to what's essentially fifth-string center status. And when you're paying a guy $2.4 million to sit in the press box or play 8 minutes a night, yeah, that's not ideal roster construction. So the Leafs are doing what they always do, scrambling to move out pieces to create cap space and roster flexibility. And Kampf, despite being exactly the kind of player every championship team needs, has become expendable. That's the NHL in 2025. Folks, win your face-offs, play great defense, contribute on the penalty kill, and you'll still get shipped out if the money doesn't work. Let's talk about the three teams that have emerged as potential landing spots, because each one tells a different story about what Kampf could bring to a new organization. First up, the Columbus Blue Jackets. This is a franchise in full rebuild mode, and honestly, it makes perfect sense why they'd be interested in Kampf. When you're trying to develop young players, you need veterans who can show them what it means to be a professional, who can win defensive zone faceoffs when the game is on the line, who can eat penalty kill minutes and let your young stars focus on offense. Kampf checks all those boxes. Columbus needs stability, and Kampf is nothing if not stable. He's not going to wow you with highlight reel goals or dazzling offensive plays, but he's going to show up every single night, do his job, and make the players around him better. For a young Blue Jackets team trying to establish an identity and build the right habits, that's invaluable. Plus, at $2.4 million, he's not breaking the bank for a team that has plenty of cap space to work with. Then we got the Chicago Blackhawks, and this one's particularly interesting because of the history. Kampf played for Chicago from 2017 to 2021, so there's familiarity here. He knows the organization. He knows the city, and the Blackhawks know exactly what they're getting. This isn't a situation where they're taking a flyer on an unknown commodity. They've seen what Kampf can do, and they know he fits their system. Chicago is in a fascinating spot right now. They've got Connor Bedard, one of the most exciting young players in the entire league, and they're trying to build a competitive team around him without rushing the process. Kampf would be perfect for them, a veteran center who can handle the tough defensive matchups, free up Bedard and other young offensive players to focus on scoring, and provide leadership in the locker room. The fit is almost too obvious. And here's the thing about Chicago. They're not afraid to bring back former players if it makes sense. There's comfort in that familiarity, both the player and the organization. Kampf would know the coaching staff's expectations. He'd understand the system, and he could step in and contribute immediately without a lengthy adjustment period. That's valuable, especially for a team that's trying to establish consistency. The third team in the mix is the Pittsburgh Penguins, and this one's intriguing for different reasons. Pittsburgh is in win-now mode, trying to squeeze every last ounce of production out of Sidney Crosby's remaining prime years. They need depth, they need reliability, and they need players who can contribute in specific, defined roles. Kampf fits that profile perfectly. Think about what Kampf would bring to Pittsburgh. You've got an aging core that needs support in the defensive zone, You need someone who can win crucial face-offs late in games when you're trying to protect a lead. You need penalty kill specialists who can eat minutes and keep your stars fresh. Kampf does all of that, and he does it at a cap hit that's manageable even for a team operating close to the ceiling like Pittsburgh. The Penguins' window is closing. Let's be real about that. Crosby is in his late 30s, and while he's still elite, Father Time is undefeated. Pittsburgh needs to maximize every season they have left with their core intact, and adding a player like Kampf who can solidify the bottom six and contribute in key situations could be the difference between making the playoffs and missing out. Now, here's where things get a bit sticky from Toronto's perspective. According to reports, the Leafs aren't just looking to dump Kampf for nothing. They want actual value back, whether that a mid-round draft pick or a prospect who could eventually contribute to the organization. And you know what? Good for them. Kampf has value, and they should be getting fair compensation for him. But let's be realistic about what that return is going to look like. We're probably talking about a 4th or 5th round pick, maybe a B-level prospect. This is a situation where Toronto is going to land a future star or a first-round pick. Kampf is a 30-year-old depth center with a $2.4 million cap hit. The market for that player is what it is, and Toronto needs to be realistic about their expectations. The timing of all this is crucial too. Training camp is wrapping up. Rosters need to be finalized, and teams are making final decisions about their lineups for the upcoming season. If Toronto is going to move Kampf, it needs to happen in the next few days. The longer they wait, the more leverage they lose, because other teams will find alternative solutions or commit to their current rosters. What's particularly frustrating about this entire situation, and I'm speaking as someone who appreciates good, sound hockey fundamentals, is that Toronto is once again prioritizing cap space over roster quality. Yes, they need flexibility. Yes, they need to make moves to optimize their lineup. But Kampf is exactly the kind of player who makes a difference in the playoffs. He's the guy who wins defensive zone faceoffs in the final minute when you're up by 1. He's the guy who kills penalties when your season is on the line. He's a guy who does all the unglamorous work that doesn't show up on highlight reels, but absolutely matters when games are tight. And yet, because of salary cap constraints and roster construction decisions, he's being shopped around like he's some kind of burden. It's maddening, and it speaks to the broader challenges facing modern NHL teams trying to build championship rosters under a hard cap. Let's game out what each potential destination would mean for Kampf personally. If he goes to Columbus, he's going to a rebuilding team where expectations are low, but playing time would be plentiful. He'd be a mentor to young players, a stabilizing presence, and he'd get the ice time to showcase his skills. Not a bad situation for a player who just wants to play. Chicago represents a nostalgia play, going back to a team where you had success, where you know the organization, where you have relationships. There's appeal in that, especially at the stage of career. The Blackhawks would give him a defined role, and he'd be part of something special in helping develop the next great Blackhawks team around Bedard. Pittsburgh is the win-now option. If Kampf cares about competing for a Stanley Cup, the Penguins give him the best chance to do that among these 3 teams. He'd be joining a roster with established stars, contributing to a team that's still trying to squeeze one more championship out of their championship core. That's an appealing proposition for any player. Here's what I'm watching for in the coming days. Which team makes the strongest push? What Toronto is willing to accept in return? And most importantly, does Kampf have any say in where he goes based on contract clauses or personal preferences? Because at the end of the day, this is a human being we're talking about, not just an asset on a balance sheet. The reality is that David Kampf's days as a Toronto Maple Leaf appear to be coming to an end. Whether he lands in Columbus, Chicago, Pittsburgh, or somewhere else entirely, the move seems inevitable at this point. Toronto needs a cap relief, and Kampf deserves to be somewhere he's valued and utilized properly. It's another example of the harsh business side of hockey, where solid, reliable players get moved not because they're bad, but because the math doesn't work. Kampf has been nothing but professional during his time in Toronto, and he deserves credit for that. Wherever he lands, that team is getting a player who will show up every night, do his job, and make everyone around him better. That's worth something, even if it doesn't always show up in the salary cap calculations. So Leafs fans, Blue Jackets fans, Blackhawks fans, Penguins fans, What do you think about a potential David Kampf trade? Is he worth the $2.4 million cap hit for a team looking to add defensive depth and face-off prowess? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I genuinely want to hear different perspectives on this. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into NHL trade rumors and roster construction, show some love with a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future content. The trade market is heating up, and we'll be here breaking down every significant move as teams finalize their rosters for the 2025 to 2026 season.